Welcome to Beyond the Margins, the podcast, the place where we engage, educate, empower, and elevate. I'm your lead learner and host, Dr. Sohn A. Each week, I sit down with some of the brightest minds and dynamic leaders in education to challenge traditional narratives, especially those shaping the experiences of students at the margins. Together, we explore new ways to reimagine schools, classrooms, and learning communities as spaces for growth and transformation. At Beyond the Margins, we center students too often overlooked, sharing the stories, strategies, and ideas that matter most. Voices long pushed aside are brought to the center. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. Did you know that nearly 40% of incarcerated men and women in the United States have no high school diploma or GED? Yet, less than 50% participate in educational programs behind bars, and only 5% access higher education. Even more striking, 95% of all incarcerated individuals will eventually return to their communities. This makes education in carceral spaces one of the most underutilized tools for transformation and community restoration. Today, we are joined by Dr. Caston, a scholar, educator, and advocate whose work reframes incarcerated learners not as statistics, but as thinkers, creators, and agents of change. Dr. Caston's research and practice center on culturally responsive teaching, adult learning, and liberation pedagogy, helping incarcerated individuals unlock their potential through literacy, choice, and authentic engagement. Help me welcome Dr. Caston to Beyond the Margins. Dr. Caston, thank you, brother, for being here with me. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. The pleasure is mine.
Thank you so very much. I'm really elated to be here to have this conversation with you in regards to education and how we can continue to be conduits of change.
Absolutely. So look, before we dive straight in, give us some of the backstory. Give us your origin story on how you got here and specifically how you got connected to prison education.
I'm a lifelong career educator. I've been an educator for about 25 years. I came in as a Spanish teacher. I taught Spanish for about 12 or 13 years. Then I became a reading specialist down in Richmond, Virginia, where I served for about 3 years. And then I became an assistant principal. 8 months into that, I found a job that was listed on Indeed.com. I applied for it and I got it. I wish I could say that, I found this because I had this epiphany one day that this is what I want to do. I did have a mistake. I thought that it was going to be juveniles, and it ended up being adults, which was quite interesting. But I find that educating adults and educating children are pretty much the same. So that's sort of what landed me there. I interviewed and I got the job, and I sort of, just went in with my hands on the plows.
You first worked in traditional schools before going behind the wall.
That's
So
correct.
I know my first experience going behind the wall as an educator, it was a little different. So what was the inaugural moment, the first gut reaction from teaching outside in the community to teaching behind the fence in prison?
So I have to really be honest with you. I really feel like, I worked in many urban environments within Richmond, Virginia, and also within Baltimore City. So, it's unfortunate that a lot of times I feel that I work with the prequel of sort of what's happening behind the fence. You're dealing with people who lack vocabulary to be able to express themselves emotionally, socially. So I really was sort of prepared because I've always worked. I mean, we know what the statistics says in regards to the demographics of the people who are behind the fence. More than 85% of those people are African American, and pretty much most of the urban environments that I worked with, the clientele that I was a Spanish teacher or reading specialist to were African American students. And also, I have to be honest with you, I'm from the south side of Richmond, Virginia. So many of these people that I am them and they are me. So I grew up in communities with many individuals who were engrossed by drugs or, wanted to sell drugs or be within, as they say, jumping off the porch and being within that street game, I sort of grew up around that. I'm no different. I just have made some different choices. And I know that many of those choices stem from education, just being realistically why I'm so passionate about education wherever I am, whether I'm behind prison walls, whether I'm internationally, regardless of where I'm teaching. I know the transformational power of education for anyone who is willing to be open and willing to learn.
And so you taught other places, and I think that's always important as an educator. Any juxtapositions you can draw from your experiences teaching internationally to teaching behind the wall before we get into this liberatory pedagogy talk we're going to have today?
I think that, again, teaching people, you have to really facilitate learning. You have to really build rapport with those who are learning. I mean, I think those things are the same, respecting those people for their culture with whomever are your clients, your students that's sitting in
Mhm.
front of you. You have to begin to build rapport with them and to begin to better understand them as learners in order to be able to reach them. So it was the same thing, I try to speak the language of the people, which
Mhm.
that language is, and we know that language, those nuances of language sort of shift according to, the spaces that you are, particularly when we're talking about code switching. There's lots of opportunities where we in America have to code switches depending on the spaces that we find ourselves in.
And that's one of those things, one of those what so-called soft skills that in our community we don't prepare young people well enough for the necessity of code switching. We kind of send them out unprepared in that regard.
I think a lot of times those that comes because of the lack of having to be put in places where you have to code switch. If you're able to sort of speak in whatever manner in which you speak all the time, and you're not put in other spaces and places where you have to code switch, you won't be able to understand what that is and what that looks like. And that most people do that. The way that anyone speaks at their kitchen table is going to be different in the way in which you speak in a courthouse, or the courthouse is going to be different from the way that you're going to speak in a mosque or a synagogue or a church, and we have to be privy of that. The way that I talk to people on the corner isn't going to be in the same manner in which I talk to someone in the corridors of Morgan State University. The ways in which we speak and use language is going to change, and I think that is a skill that you call it a soft skill, but I think it's a very hard skill that is very necessary, because it's that skill that can keep you out of a lot of places or get you into some places when you are able to sort of speak the language. And language isn't just the words that are coming out our mouth, it's signs, it's signals, it's being
Absolutely.
able to know how to conduct yourself, how to stand, how to eat. I mean, I remember coming through school and we had to learn code switching, going into a fancy restaurant, learning all of the type of forks
Mhm.
to use and the correct spoon. It was so
Right.
overwhelming and gave me so much anxiety. I said, I never want to have to find myself in places where I have to figure out which one is the salad fork and which one can I utilize for the entree.
Yeah.
It's being able to offer these experiences where they will be able to see how others are carrying themselves so that they can have an example of what that looks like. Because if we don't have examples of how we should be conducting and carrying ourselves, we won't know. And I think that that's a very important piece. Part of in the work that I'm doing is really coming back to just the grassroots effort of exposure, making sure that
Yes.
people are exposed. So I think that it's important that we allow opportunities where people can actually code switch and practice that skill, sort of like I do it even within my classroom. When I'm teaching Spanish, the only academic discourse that you can use is the target language. You have to speak
Mhm.
in the language, because you're not going to have many other opportunities outside of this small
Practice.
space to use the language. So it is
Mhm.
my responsibility as the educator to set up those type of practice spaces.
Yeah, I think we undervalue the role of exposure. I think, you can only be what you can see or have seen or know to be. When we expand exposure, we expand potential. What role does relevance have in that? The relevance of the instruction they're receiving. I worked with a teacher before in behind the fence who treated school like middle school. They had to raise their hands, they had little popsicle sticks. But these are 25, 30, 45, 50-year-old men, so I'm asking, what's the role of relevance in instruction for liberatory practices?
I believe that all those type of things have their place. Believe it or not, sometimes the biggest motivator of men and people can be a sticker or just a very kind word that we give to them. I think that, you have to make, again, those connections. The most relevant piece within any educational space is rapport, and those people that you are teaching can feel some type of trust for you, and not trust where you're going to be my best friend, but I can trust you to be vulnerable enough to let you know that, hey, mathematics is difficult for Jack Ken. I have to be able to trust you to share that the multiplication facts is something that I struggle with, versus you trying to make me do them and not trying to make me feel comfortable enough to be able to share those things with you without you making me feel incompetent or imbecilic for sharing those weaknesses and things that I have. So we have to understand the importance of relationship building. We have to understand the authenticity when it comes to assignments. I teach also at Morgan State University as an adjunct writing professor. Well, you really have to make writing assignments relevant and authentic to the learners so that they can want to be a part of it, so that they can feel that this isn't just a waste of my time. There is an actual purpose. There's the responsibility of the teacher who's standing in front of them to be able to find those things that are going to still get the objective and goal met of the curriculum, but in a very relevant or authentic way. I guess more so for me than relevance, authenticity, that the assignments that we're doing in order to engage people have to be authentic. You can do something with LinkedIn. They have a section on there where you have to write a narrative about what your goals and overall objectives are as a professional. So now this just isn't some narrative that I'm just having them to pull out of the sky about Shakespeare or about comparing James Baldwin to bell hooks. This is really something that they can do that is teaching them narrative writing practices, and is also serve a purpose to be able to be used for a way for them to network as their entry level into the professional realm. You have to make sure that the things that we are teaching, are of high interest as well, but it'll help to sort of get the curriculum taught. But at this point, the only way to get it sometimes to engage you is really to sit you down and have you to read some of the documents. So we have to pull the Constitution. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about why they wrote it. Let's actually read the Constitution so you can know what's in it and how that's relevant for you, because they'll find the relevance in learning about civic practices and things, and particularly when we're talking about justice involved, that should be one of the easiest areas to captivate when you're talking about the Bill of Rights and the things that you have the right to as an American citizen. When we're talking about the Declaration of Independence and how that, and the Mayflower Compact, and then the Emancipation Proclamation, and how those bills are sort of all intertwined, but how do you engage them even when they can't find relevance in wanting to sit and learn about the Mayflower Compact at first? So they think.
Right.
So I think sometimes it's the onus comes on the instructor who's in front of them
Absolutely.
to find out how you can make it relevant. I think that that's when a lot of that learning acquisition will really begin to take place sort of naturally, where the teacher can really serve as the facilitator, and the actual aha moments and learning peaks that they have will really spark their interest to sort of delve deeper into the subject matter.
You've opened up some new areas for us to discuss, and primarily the role and importance of rapport building in an educational sense, especially behind a fence where you're dealing with incarcerated men who aren't the fuzzy, warm kids who bring an apple and put it on your desk, like you might see, in a LEA elementary school. So
Sure.
yeah, the role of rapport in being able to direct that authentic connection to the content and the relevance in that person's life. And why is that even maybe more important inside of in carceral spaces when we're trying to form those partnerships for learning?
Amen. And again, I'm going to come back to the teacher in me, because these are practices that I use in educational settings. You really have to, and when I say build rapport, it's not, I don't need to know your favorite football team, even though sometimes that does become a part of it. I believe in building academic rapport. What are
Hmm.
your learning modalities? How do you
Yeah.
best learn? Give me some writing samples. Let me see an authentic piece that you're actually writing uninhibitedly, so that I can see if you know how to properly use language and how to
Hmm.
properly use grammar. So these are some of the things that I utilize in these spaces in order to build academic rapport with my students, finding out, their depth of knowledge when we look at the scales of just basic call and response to the high end of synthesizing and being able to take what you learn in theory and make it applicable to something, So really being able to find their strengths and their weaknesses, taking surveys of the things that they like, finding out what their triggers are, because I find a
Hmm.
lot of times, we as educators can be trigger poppers, is what I
Yes.
like to
Very
call it.
true.
We're quick to pull the trigger,
Yeah.
what makes them angry. And instead of staying away from that, we lean on that so that we can sort of, carry the narrative where our number one job should be that we're trying to um, de-escalate individuals so that they can
Yeah.
want to remain within the learning environment. And the only way that you're going to get that is through rapport. That's even with students. I find that in leadership, you got to do that with your staff. You have to know your staff strengths and weaknesses. And are you going to be the type of leader or teacher who leans into your staff weaknesses and try to pull them down and make them feel bad about them? Want to find Jack's strength.
Yeah.
Instead of making me write 100 times, I will not talk in class. You should have understood that he's an auditor. He likes to talk. He likes to speak. So allow him to present, allow him to be in the front to do so. So when you know these things about your students, you know who the leaders are. It helps you with the
Yeah.
leadership in the classroom. Me as the teacher, there's some things that I'm not going to be able to help my students to understand in the manner in which one a fellow student or fellow
Right.
mate is going to be able to do. So I had to be able to know how to pull on that and
Right.
not allow my ego to be in the way. And the only way to do that is to build rapport. And also because I want to be respected, I have to learn to respect my students.
Hmm.
Certain things I don't want you to say to me. There's certain tones
Yes.
that I don't want you to take with me. Therefore, you have to give what how you want to receive, because a lot of times what I find, we can dish things, but then we can't take those very things that break us down and trigger us. So I think that when you're aware of the things that trigger you in those spaces, I was always real with my students when I was a teacher at some of the roughest and toughest schools in Baltimore City. Look, today isn't my day. Today isn't the day. Today I need you
Mhm.
all
Right.
follow the objective that's on the
Yeah.
board. I need
Right.
you to do the La
Yeah.
Bomba, which was the drill in
Right.
Espanol. We're going to do some oral
Yeah.
practice. We're going to do some written practice. You're going to do some listen practice. I'm not
Hmm.
feeling too well.
Hmm.
Hey, look, I'm worried at that time, am I going to be able to get this paper at John Hopkins in that I need to get in? So right
Right.
now isn't that moment. So I believe that when I'm vulnerable with my students and I show them that I am
Yeah.
human and that I want that, then I have to reciprocate that when they come
Yeah.
in and say, Dr. Caston, today isn't the day. Or Profe Caston, I'm sleepy today. Profe Caston, I'm hungry. It's not a good day for you to be joking with me. It's not a good day. I just need to sit here and put my head on the table. I need to rest and I need to use this time to be able to do so. And not in a disrespectful tone, but that's even a sign of respect because you're
Yeah.
comfortable enough to come in my class to be vulnerable enough to sleep.
Yeah.
I think that when you take that type of tone and within the classroom, with creating a space where everyone can be themselves, where everyone can, be able to express how they're feeling and is going to be respected with all due respect, you'll find that it becomes an environment where engagement is going to begin to happen authentically at that point, because I now understand that not only do I have a voice, but someone will actually take my voice into consideration when dealing with me.
Hmm.
It's something that a former supervisor always said, we shouldn't treat people how we want to be treated. We should actually treat people how
How they
they
want
want
to be
to be
treated.
treated.
Absolutely.
What you may want to be called may not be what I want to be called. So we have to keep that in mind when we want true teaching and learning to happen. It took me many years to be able to get here. And then something with dealing with adult education is you have to remember these aren't children.
Yeah. They're
These are
not blank slates, right?
these grown A
Yeah.
men
Yeah. Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
dealing with. So you
Right.
can't carry them, even though with my children that I was teaching at schools at such as Frederick Douglass High School and Lombard Middle School, e even at that point in some of the urban areas, many of them are dealing with adult issues and have
Hmm.
adult things going on, so you
Very much
can't
so.
deal with them pretty much like their children either. You have to meet them where they are in order to gain that trust and that respect to be able to teach them, and a lot of people aren't gonna admit that they really don't know how to academically develop that. You have to remember many of them are dealing with things and just as involved. They're dealing with court cases and things they're
Yeah.
going when we're in pre-K through 12, many of them are dealing with, foster care and, there's a myriad of things happening in the life of that child that's sitting in that classroom in front of you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're trying to be as respectful as possible, but now you're going to pull a trigger on something and cause something that could possibly unnecessarily or could be quelled if you simply had a relationship with the individual that was sitting in front of you and that you were trying to, teach.
And a lot of times we talk about rapport, but rapport should be informing how we go about the instructional pieces as well. How do I know when to pivot as an educator? So it's not just one level about, classroom management, but this rapport goes into every aspect of how we inform our practice.
And again, when I'm talking about rapport, this is the time to understand how a gardener's multiple intelligences and understand the way in which you're
Hmm.
going to build your lessons because you can't, you may be a visuals type teacher, but those visuals aren't going to be effective if your students are kinesthetic and auditory learners. They're going to need to hear and move
Hmm.
around. Your visuals may help, but it's not going to be as effective if you would actually teach in the modalities of those that you're teaching. It's not about how I best learn. It's about how my students best learn. But as most teachers do, mathematical logical is my weakest area. I almost have none
So
there.
we run away from that as fast as we can.
As fast as we
The
can,
kids.
instead of realizing if you're gonna be a true practitioner, you can't run from that because it's my responsibility to ensure that these children learned to speak the language. And it was from that, I was then able to see how they learn the language, and now I could then make them do some of those creative things that I
That
wanted
you
them
wanted. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
now they feel fronted on the
Hmm.
end of knowing the vocabulary and the grammatical structure through the practices.
Yeah.
They're now comfortable enough to sort of do those things that I desire,
Hmm.
So sometimes you have to, you
Give
know
to give to get, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, you have to
Yeah.
decrease so that they may increase.
Yeah, and you're speaking on the role of autonomy, and what does that do for students, all students, but students who haven't always had choice, and what does that do for their thinking and their learning journey when now I have choice in how I approach this learning? And
Mhm,
so that's something I've noticed that teachers aren't always willing that level of control. We're
mhm,
uncomfortable as educators relinquishing that back to students. How
yeah.
have you traversed that, and how do you enable those teachers who work for you to do it?
I think you have to, sort of lead in the same manner. You have to know the people that you're leading. You have to know their strengths and know their weaknesses and be willing to allow them to work in their strengths in order to be able to shine. And I think when you sort of allow that for your staff, it trickles down to what they're going to do because they're going to understand the grace that is given unto them. And hopefully they won't work out of an area of gray or hypocrisy where they're allowing grace to be received, but they're not going to give any. If that happens, it's the job of me as a leader to point that out.
Mhm.
You know that you receive grace, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
why
Share.
wouldn't you want that to be, extended towards others? And I'll give an example, perfect example from a leader I had, our mentor Bell. I was one of those teachers, particularly my first year. Oh my goodness, you talking about 21 years old and just hot off the presses. I was on fire. Have the best classroom control and management rather,
Mhm,
so my
mhm.
students, my motto was if you come on no, if on time is
It's late. Yeah.
early is on time is late.
It's
So they were
late, and late is unacceptable. Yeah,
unacceptable. So when they would
yeah.
come to my classroom door, the bells just ringing, I would send them to the office to get a pass almost immediately. I mean, like you could be right at the door, the bell is ringing, you're coming across. It was like, nope, go get a pass. You're late. And it was
Mhm.
amazing. My principal got so sick of me doing that because she was, now that I'm a leader within a school facility, I understand how that can be a nuisance when got constantly people just coming, particularly when they could have been there. You could have just kind of just let them in, give them
Mm,
a verbal warning. And I
yeah,
mean, that really was nothing. They was at the class. It wasn't like they were,
yeah.
egregiously late. So you should show some grace and mercy. And I'm gonna tell you what she said to me. She called me into her office and she said, Mr. Caston, you have one more time to send these students who are late to your class to the office and get a pass. And I'm gonna start making you put in time for every time that I know that they're opening the janitorial dock to let you in to come in here in the mornings.
Through the back door.
You're late.
Yeah,
So it was like, look, don't you understand that grace is being given unto you, and then you're not going to give grace unto others? And that was something that I learned very early, my second year when I first moved to Baltimore, of being able to extend that type of grace. You can't be doing one thing and then trying to act like you're such a stickler for everyone else. That's hypocrisy. Be hot or cold because
yeah,
the other you'll be spewed out of the mouth of. So
yeah.
you have to be cognizant of that as an instructor and as a leader wherever you are, just being realistic.
Yeah, and m- learners, black learners, marginalized learners, urban learners have a keen sense for sniffing you out and fleshing you out. So you have to lead with authenticity and understanding, and
Yeah.
like you said, grace.
It's very important, to because a lot of people are dealing with a lot of things,
Yeah,
we
right.
all are, sometimes I go to work and I'm dealing with a lot of personal things when you're building rapport is that you teach through modeling as well,
Yeah,
when I get cussed out sometimes by students or by these men, I have to really sit and share with them. They'll come back and be very apologetic and telling you about all the things that are going on.
yeah,
And then when I sit them down and say, well, let me tell you about all the things that's going on in my life, all within, being ethical that I have going on. So you can understand that, you're not dealing with a android here. I'm not
yeah,
a robot, but I
yeah,
can't take those things out on you because you had nothing to do with that. So when I
mhm,
come into the workplace, I have to leave home at home. Just like I learned very early in my career when I was raising my godson, he was always telling me when I would leave from these schools, leave school here. We're going
mhm,
home. I don't want to have to deal
yeah.
with getting the backlash of some anger that you have for something that happened in school.
Because it's very important to understand that, as an educator, we're moving in and out of classrooms, especially in carceral spaces. They're not moving as much. So they may miss a lot of that. And students generally don't think of teachers as whole people. You're
Yeah.
the person providing this educational service to me. So it helps to humanize ourselves to our learners so that we can, really take full stock in what we're doing together. And that looks
Mhm,
different from day to day.
mhm.
What are some of the systemic inequities that you know and identify that keep students from being able to fully engage inside of incarceral spaces or even at Morgan State where engagement is still an issue because they're learners?
That's a good question. I think that, I see that literacy is something that I don't think is sort of advocated enough for. Um, I had an epiphany going to the African American Museum over the break, and there was an exhibit that sort of changed my life forever, and it was titled "Illegal to Read." You know,
Mm,
so, so really advocating, I feel, for literacy and really helping people to understand the importance of being literate. I think that we really need to um, really address that and to help people understand why they need to read. We have to understand that a lot of the data shows that people who are considered and earmarked illiterate by third grade, which, up until third grade as a reading
mhm,
specialist, we were always taught that you learn to read from first grade to third, and then from third grade, continuing education, you read to learn. So
mhm,
if by third grade you haven't learned to read, you're going to be messed up because you're going to not be able to read to learn. Taking a look, actually, I believe it starts at the early engagement and early literacy phase of really kept catching and captivating because they show that a lot of the students who have IEPs and are struggling readers at that point pretty much are going to be pipelined to prison. Also, too, how do we get these? Because we talk systemic, but sometimes there are some things that are in the systems that are there to help that we are not utilizing, or we're not sharing that information enough, or we're sharing, but then we're not offering assistance to help people to understand that process, to help people to understand, what does it look like? What does family literacy look like?
Yeah.
Because I'm not a literate individual in the home. I don't read books. So how can I help my child to be able to be literate? How can I ensure that I be a model for them when I'm just functioning literate myself? We have
Yeah.
to make people feel comfortable to be able to share what they don't know, to be able to provide information that they may be ignorant to. I think that once we share that information, be willing to help. I just have to say this, a lot of times there are helps and programs that are out there to
Hmm.
sort of help individuals who desire to be helped. Now, I do hear a lot of times people say, well, I didn't know this information. I didn't know that I had access to this, but I will have to say, an old statement that I learned in US government: ignorance of the law is no excuse. You still have some onus to be able
Hmm.
to hunt for information for those inequities that we want to destroy. Particularly, I think about me growing up in the projects of Richmond, Virginia. Some of the inequities we know already in urban households is that most urban households don't have their children don't have libraries and things,
Right.
which is
Right.
essential for growing vocabulary, is access to books.
Yep.
And I think about how my own mother purchased a $500 Encyclopedia Britannica set in 1988. I really say those encyclopedias and the desire to want to go chase waterfalls really, really saved my life. My mom knew enough to know that I have to be able to have this type of access to my children in order for them to be able to be successful, because we know that at that time in 1988, those Encyclopedia Britannica was the World Wide Web.
Yes. It's funny you bring those encyclopedias up because circa 88, in my Virginian household, my daddy also bought a box of Encyclopedia Britannicas. And this is what he told me. He said, if you read a page out the encyclopedia every day, I'll give you $5 at the end of the week.
Oh,
And so literacy was one of those things that my parents fully understood the power of. When I grew up a little later, I was a teenager into the hip hop rap scene. He
okay.
would do things like take the article on the Wu-Tang Clan coming to town out of the Virginia Pilot, cut it out and put it on my bed. Because research says that it doesn't matter what people read, as long as they're reading.
Mhm.
Look, there's even a research study that says that simply having books in a house, on a bookshelf, on a table, increases literacy in kids, even if they see no one reading them.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like one of these systemic linchpins to success and achievement is around this thing called literacy, and how do we get our kids, our community, not just on par, because you can read at an advanced level, and that's what we got to get to for
Mhm.
free analytical thinking. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And people have to understand strategies of helping people to be better readers, and understanding teaching reading in the content area. Again, going back to even what I was saying earlier about teaching the social studies piece, that's reading in the content area when I'm sitting there and I'm reading aloud. They really, we have to realize books on tapes or audio books, that's reading. People, I don't read books, I listen to books. Well, that's considered reading, actually,
yeah.
as long as you're taking in this vocabulary, you're taking in this information, you're able to sort of hear it and to comprehend it. It actually is a form of reading, which is going to
Mhm.
help you to academically grow and develop as well. And I'm telling you, pretty much the only thing I do is take these books, these basic basal books that's breaking it down as simplistically as possible. And we're sitting down and we're reading them, and we're gaining and we're creating anchor charts. We're taking notes and we're having conversations that's naturally flowing from it. And they're being able to see that we can engage in healthy conversation and debate back and forth, even about a topic that, at first you didn't even see any relevance in it. And now you're
Mhm.
sitting in class having full out debates on whether the Bill of Rights is effective today, and if everyone was included when it was written, and is that relevant in a 2026 society? Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You have the ability to think critically.
Hmm.
A lot of times they're just lacking the vocabulary because
Yeah.
many of them are so far behind. Like, I'm not a book reader. I like pictures and captions. I learn
Okay.
best with lots of pictures and lots of captions. And if they don't have pictures and captions, I prefer articles and magazines over,
Long
big
format.
chapter books actually
Yeah.
give me anxiety. Books like Harry Potter or Sin, even Native Son, is as much as I love it, and even when I
Mm.
try to teach it, I only can always get through Bigger Thomas, the first book or the first chapter that, and I'm stuck. I'll give another story. There's the movie that Queen Latifah was in with, I think his name is Steve Martin, I think. Bringing Down the House some years when
Yep.
she was coming home from prison, and he was expecting this sexy white woman, and there it was, this very obtuse black woman, coming into his house like, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. And I remember his son had an issue with reading. He couldn't read, he didn't like to read. And one day he was caught reading, but he was reading a nudie book, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And it was amazing because the dad was like, "What in the world are you doing?" And Queen Latifah got him to understand. Don't you realize that the boy is reading?
There's words in the nudie
And
book too. Yeah.
he was reading, So his dad was like, "Oh, wait a minute, yes."
Yeah.
We thought he couldn't read,
Yeah.
So it was like, wow, it's not always what we're reading. We just have to make sure that we're reading things that
Yeah.
are, a little bit more than just urban novels. I always tell people, even if you're like into hip hop, back in the day, the Source magazine was very well written, They're very
Hmm.
well written magazines and things that you can read when it comes to how to build cars. If you're into the Second Amendment and arms, they're magazines that's built, that teaches you and give you information about anything that it is that you have an interest in. You want to be very well learned or literate in
Hmm.
regards to that subject matter. And I think that that is important, that we teach that, and that we show that in all that we do. And the better that you do that, the better you'll be able to maneuver and be a part of this democratic society.
Beyond the Margins, the podcast. We'll return in a moment.
Your Divine Journey, LLC, is here to walk with you through life's ups and downs. Whether you're seeking therapy, life coaching, support, or personal consultations, we provide a safe, empowering space to heal, grow, and step into your best self. Your journey is unique. Let's make it divine. Connect with us today and start moving forward with clarity, confidence, and peace. View www.yourdivinejourneyllc.com.
At the Travel Bureau, we are dedicated to creating bespoke luxury experiences for the discerning traveler, specializing in detail-rich journeys designed with heart and intention. We turn your dream getaway into a beautiful, curated reality. Wherever you're going, the Travel Bureau will get you there in style, comfort, and joy.
If you're teaching urban, alternative, or non-traditional students and wondering why engagement feels harder than ever, the new book by Dr. Sohn A is for you. Unlocking Student Engagement isn't theory. It's real strategies for real classrooms, built on trust, relevance, and relationships. And educators across the country are already responding. Unlocking Student Engagement debuted at #1 in cultural pedagogies, philosophy and social aspects of education, educational professional development, and educational certification and development. Grab your copy today wherever you buy books, and let's change how engagement shows up in our classrooms. Welcome back to Beyond the Margins.
Incarcerated men like to read. We get inside of, the confines of prison, and we become Rhodes scholars, and they got books stacked up and they sleep on books, 12 inches thick. And so what is the shift? Is it just the time? Is it the clarity of mind that transforms some incarcerated people into great readers and lovers of learning?
I think sometimes people just don't have the opportunity to realize that they love to read. No one has taught them to like to learn. So I think that is important for us to, again, like I just said, you got to let people know, You don't have to read a book like me. Don't put no Sports Illustrated in front of me. I don't want to read that. I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in Afro Latino culture. I am interested in la lengua del español. So if you put something in español enfrente de mí, and it's possible that I may read a Spanish Sports Illustrator just so I can pick up that vocabulary, but you're going to have to make it of high interest for me and allow them the time to even sit down to understand that it's okay to spend time with the book. You don't have to always be moving and always be loud. It's okay to find something that's interesting to you to be able to sit. And a lot of times we have to know in these type of environments that many of these people are coming from, they it's not a lot of time. They don't have a lot of time to just read a good book. They don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out what they're going to eat, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to remain safe, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to pay bills, and they're trying to figure out, I mean, you're in foster care, or when, you don't have the basic necessities because of someone else's lack of care for you as your
Yeah.
caregiver. You know what I'm saying? So, so a lot of times in those type of spaces, there's nothing but time on your hand, so we had to begin to again teach young people the love for reading and help them to find things that they enjoy to read on a level that will continue to help them to develop.
I love it. And I also love it when you always do your bilingual flex like it's nothing and just keep moving. That's a strong skill set. Here's the question for you. When I say liberation pedagogy, what does that mean to you?
Liberation pedagogy, for me, I would say, hey, if I break that down, that means to be emancipated, to be free. And pedagogy is the science of teaching, the way in which you teach and how you do it. It's me allowing my students to be free to learn how they best learn. You know what I'm saying? To allow them to be free to be individuals, to be individual thinkers, to allow them to think in their way. Now, my job is to challenge the way in which they think, because I think a lot of times what's happening in America right now, if it's not necessarily popular opinion all the time, you can be in trouble for your beliefs. But I think that we have to allow people to still formulate opinions and things as long as they can back up what they're saying with facts to support the things that they're saying. So I think that when we're talking about liberation, pedagogy is really, freeing up the way in which we allow children to learn, not being so restrictive in saying that they have to learn sequentially, not allowing them to regularly grow and develop and at their pace. Sometimes it may take a little time. It may not be as fast as others, but if you're consistent, sometimes it's the consistency that matters. So when I think about liberation pedagogy, I'm thinking about the freedom to really, really teach in the manner in which the students or the clientele in which I am teaching are going to best learn.
You really did speak to the concept of liberation pedagogy. How do we engage in our practice of teaching and learning in such a way that people find themselves and find themselves free? And whatever that is always self-determined what that freedom looks like. We spoke a little earlier what freedom may look like for you could be completely what freedom looks like for me. Two VA boys, right? Circa the same years, but what we call freedom may very much be different.
Yeah.
And if we sit in the same classroom, side by side, the instruction that's given, does it transform me in the same way or in a different way while transforming you? And so as educators, that's the big task. You may have 42 teenagers, you may have 15 incarcerated men, but how can our practice inform transformation in their lives?
Yeah.
You wrote an article in 2023, I ain't a dummy, or I ain't no dummy.
I
I ain't a
ain't so
dummy.
dummy, yo.
I ain't
Yeah.
your dummy, yo. Okay, there
Yeah.
you go. And in there, you said something I want you to kind of flesh out for us. You said, when working with disinvested youth, never see yourself as superior or be so high-minded you cannot meet them on their level of understanding. Break that down for us.
Well, you have to reach people where they are. Sometimes when we're in these spaces, again, it used to always be bothersome to me in elementary school when you're upset with a 4 or 5-year-old because they don't know all 26 of the alphabets. that's a tough process. It's only easy to you because you've been doing it for
Yeah,
100
yeah.
years. So you have to get on their level to understand what their struggles are and what they're going through. You have to be empathetic, to be able to put yourself in the shoes of those who are in front of you. And you can't think that someone isn't intelligent enough to know when you're being sarcastic or you're being condescending or you're talking down to them or you're triggering them and you're trying to make them upset. You don't know what people know. You don't know people background. You don't know what people experiences are, so don't treat people like they're beneath you, and just because you're better off than some people don't mean that you're better than those people.
Amen. What's one common misconception people have of incarcerated learners? I was talking the little context. I was talking to a family member, and they asked me, I mean, do incarcerated men really want to change? So what's one? And I'm thinking, yeah, a lot of them are already changed. But what's one common misconception people carry about incarcerated learners?
I would say a misconception is even me, I wrote about this and I wrote a chapter in a book entitled Fighting the Good Fight. And it's looking at the African American narrative to like leadership within education. And I really talked about how when I first got a job working in a penitentiary system, I started watching all those old movies, Penitentiary. I revisited Oz. I was watching all of
Mm,
those, all those first 48
yeah.
and what's the one when you go in for a while when they put you in prison, they're trying
Oh yeah, the undercover one,
yeah,
60
yeah.
days in or something.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. So I was watching all that stuff and he was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be in for my money. Am I tough enough? Am I going to be macho enough? You know what I'm saying? Which is like, uh-oh, I'm definitely going to sink there, if it's going to take all of that. But I think that, something my father has always taught me, always be authentic, always be who you are, Jarkin.
What's one lie black men hear that you would love to undo?
Wow. Um, that we are not enough, that, we have the ability to be great. We are enough, we can learn. We are scholars. We are from greatness, also to know who you are and from whence your people come. And we shouldn't be ashamed of where we come, regardless how rocky the path. We have to understand, the shoulders that we stand upon are very mighty and that we can do anything that we set our mind to. And I know that sometimes the situations in which we are born into or the hands that we are seemingly dealt seem difficult to sort of navigate. But even that four and a possible can become five actual books that you make if you work hard enough and you strategize just right. You still may be able to set the other team if you play your cards correctly and strategically. So I think that we really had to learn to encourage one another. I think we seek out differences too much, instead of realizing that there's a lot of things that are similar. And I think that when we're dealing one with another, we have to operate in a manner of respect, and be willing to allow others to be themselves. Know that we can have philaios or brotherly love for one another. And I think that's very important.
What's one truth that we don't hear enough of?
One truth that we don't have to hear enough of, that you are. Just that
Period. Hard
just that
stop. You are. Yeah, I love it. Hey, look, bro, Doc, you are a mentor to me, a partner to me, a collaborator. I appreciate your time. Every time we sit down and we talk is eye-opening. And I think what we do, we support each other through this work,
yeah,
and this is the kind of thing that we have to do more of. So
yes.
thank you for being here. And look, you always have a place at Beyond the Margins. What's next? What's coming down the pike for you?
Well, I wrote a book, last year. So I really want to begin to get out there to really push that. Jotkin speaks. I'm really trying to help people to understand that your narrative and your story matters. You need to be able to be confident in sort of telling that story because there's going to be somebody who I can't speak to. They're not going to hear it from me, but they're going to need to hear it from you. And you need to understand that the things that you went through in your life, can really help somebody else. It's somebody else who need to know that you made it. There's somebody else who need to know about those things that you struggle with, those things that, made you who you are today. And a lot of times we are sitting in our silos and in silence when we really should be sharing. And it doesn't always have to be on a big platform. It can be grassroots levels when you're just sharing those things with a stranger who you meet in the market, or you share with someone in your neighborhood, or you share with someone who you decide to mentor, but really begin to understand that your voice can be your weapon of choice. So really out there trying to promote the book, out there really trying to engage internationally as well. I just received word that I'm going to be a part of the virtual service project, where I'm going to be donating about 5 to 15 hours a week in regards to helping the Ministry of Education in Belize with some of their professional development when it comes to individualized education plans and how to differentiate instruction and providing professional development for teachers throughout their country. So I'm donating some time with that, because I think that is really important that we give back. I think that it's very important that we take our time, our tenth, and our talents in order to leave our imprint here on earth. So I'm really thankful for that opportunity to be a volunteer for this service pilot in Belize with the Peace Corps. So hopefully other people will be inspired by that, and that others will follow behind me. Hopefully my story and my voice will inspire others to realize, hey, I can do this. Because again, as I said, you are.
Well, look, brother, thank you for being a torchbearer. Keep doing the good work. Keep fighting the good fight. As always, man, keep moving beyond the margins. It's a pleasure having you today.
Thank you.
As Dr. Caston reminds us, education is not just about passing tests. It's about unlocking freedom, building agency, and reclaiming your story. Behind every wall, there's a mind ready to be free, and education is the key. I wonder, what would happen if we treated education not as a system of control, but as a primary pathway to liberation for every mind society has tried to lock away?
Next time on Beyond the Margins.
What happens to leaders when we don't necessarily do that healing work, that holistic work?
Yeah, Frederick Douglass said it best, man. It's easier to build strong boys than repair broken men. Although I agree with our ancestor when it comes to like that piece, but I would double down on that and say we got to do what's hard and restore our men, the broken men, because we perpetuate brokenness in our communities and our families if we don't address that brokenness.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Margins. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, share this episode, rate and review the show, and let's keep the dialogue going. If you would like to connect, email me at Sean@beyondthemarginsllc.com. That's SOHN at beyondthemarginsllc.com. It's been a pleasure being with you. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, keep leading, and keep pushing beyond the margins.